Welcome to another episode of Victoria's Lounge from the Radisson Blu Hotel. Now, this is the first show of a two-part series we're doing on boundaries. On this particular show, we'll be talking about boundaries in relationships, from marriage to friendships, and even with significant others, and why it's so important to lay those boundaries early in any relationship. So let's get the conversation started. Meet my guests. Angie Murenga is a certified executive leadership coach, CEO, and founder of Kingdom Business Solutions. She's also a speaker, mentor, and author, having written The Purpose and Leadership Manual. Kelvin Ndiritu is the director of the Fearless Summit, an annual gathering of marketplace and church leaders who are passionate about bringing godly change in every sector of society. He's also the lead pastor at Mavuno Church downtown. His better half, Lucy Ndiritu, is a senior manager for sales and distribution at an FMCG firm. They have been married for 9 years and have 2 boys. All right, so let's get the conversation started. Boundaries. We felt, at least in the beginning of the year, we need to have this conversation. People are quite bad when it comes to setting boundaries for themselves, let alone for people who will be in their lives. But thank you so much, Pastor Kelvin and Lucy, for joining us.
Thank you.
Let's begin with defining boundaries.
Yeah.
What are they and why are they so important?
Well, I guess I can begin with a textbook definition of what boundaries are, and if you look up for boundaries, you'll see that it's probably a line that marks the end of a particular area and the beginning of another. And one of the things that my wife likes to say is life is not one block. It's little pieces. It's one block made of little pieces, and boundaries then help you define what these little pieces in your life are. So if you don't have boundaries which help you define what these little pieces are, then you find it's very difficult for you to maintain a healthy life across board. So in a way, the definition of boundary then is just to define what are the areas of your life, where do they start, where do they end, and then how do you maintain those areas of your life.
Right.
Yeah.
Lucy, I'm sure you want to add on to that, even in terms of the importance of having boundaries in your life.
Yeah, I think what I can add is as explained, this is where something ends and where something else starts. Usually as women, we'll get carried away. Then you're too much of a mother or you're too much of a friend. And you forget that you're supposed to be an employee, for example, and it's school this, school child this, and all that. So it's important that you have a stop sign that tells you, okay, for you to be a whole human being, fully functional human being, then you need to balance all the facets that then make you who you are.
Right.
Yeah.
When should someone, it's a pretty obvious question at the beginning, but when should someone start to set boundaries? Because sometimes they could feel, well, I didn't do it in the beginning. Yeah. So at what point do I start laying ground where the other person doesn't feel, oh, why now? Yeah. And feeling that you're offending them. Have I done something wrong? Why didn't you say this earlier? Yeah. So what is the timing that someone should begin setting boundaries?
The question that we need to sort of backtrack and ask is, what kind of person do you want to become? Because when you have the big picture, then it will help you know what are the things that are important in my life and what are not. So if you have a big idea of who you want to become in your career, then you know what you need to invest in. Maybe if it is school, if it is having a mentor, someone who can walk with you this journey. If it is parenting, what kind of children do you want? If it is marriage, what kind of a marriage relationship do you want in future? Then what that does is that it begins to define for you, because when you think about it, when you're going on a journey, if you know that you're going to Mombasa, then you know how to prepare for your journey. You know how to park for your journey. You know what kind of car will be comfortable for that. So you sort of have an idea of where you're going and what you need to where you're going. And what that does is that it begins to help you, and it has helped us because that's where we started, by just asking ourselves. It's not something that we figured out. We're not brilliant enough to figure out when we were starting off in marriage, but we sort of figured out along the way as we've asked fundamental questions, and also we realized that we cannot be all things to all men. That's Jesus'
That's
work.
Jesus.
That's not us. So we sort of agreed and we said, what are some of the values that we want to see, even for example in our family and in our marriage, and we said, I mean, something like quality time is an important thing.
Yeah.
So even when we think about jobs, the kind of jobs that we'll get, and I mean, she's in corporate, and the way we've worked it out is in such a way that if any of this will compromise our time together, it's not even we don't even negotiate. We don't even talk about it because we know where we are going. So it's easier for us to set those boundaries and say we can't go beyond here. You know, with our children, we knew what kind of we have 2 boys, and we know what kind of men we want to raise, so it was very clear for us. You know, one is that what kind of friends do we need to have who are probably raising the same kind of children in the same kind of way, and associate with those ones. Now, you can have as many friends as you want, but not everyone will take you to where you want to go. And now you begin to invest in those relationships, and that's what we have done. So for us, in a way, beginning with a big picture, it has helped us to sort of define the boundaries and even going forward.
We are not always this way. Like, it sounds so
I know, it sounds so
hunky-dory.
brilliant. We can write a book about it.
Well, he probably, because of his personality, has been a little more, you know, structured. I, on the other hand, am a lot more relational, and I want to, you know, have another cup of coffee and hang out with a girlfriend a little longer. So at the beginning, I had a lot of learning as well, because of, you know, it's not in my personality. So it's like in corporate especially, you can get sucked in. There's a deadline, you know, it has shifted forward, usually it shifts forward, and, you know, it needs to be completed. And so I'm on the phone saying, I can't come, you know, can you put the kids to bed? And we had to have conversations of, okay, we can't keep shifting these boundaries every day because there'll always be work. If you finish all of it today, then tomorrow what do you do? Like, I mean, you need to come home. So I've had to learn as well, and it helps a lot that he's a lot more structured and has carried me, you know, on that journey. So now I can actually stand up and say, I said 5, you know, it's a wrap. My kids need me, or my husband needs me, or so and so. And that's where now it ends and the next thing begins.
And I'm curious to find out, because, and you kind of alluded to it, Lucy, in terms of when you come together as 2 separate entities and now you're one, sometimes the boundaries shift. So you have set boundaries for yourself, but now you have to compromise and see what works. How did you go about that and creating that balance with each other? And what boundaries did you change and which ones did you keep constant?
Okay, we started by fighting a lot because I mean, like something like time, the time boundary. He's very good at it. It's like the wedding starts at 10. We need to be there at 9:45. Lucy will check in at 10:15. It's not my wedding. I mean, I'm at the wedding. I came, I made it. So I needed to learn. I was like, okay, obviously, this life is just about becoming a better version of you. And just as the Bible says, iron sharpens iron, so he has this strength that I needed to learn. So time was one of those. So I'm like, okay, now we can't go to the wedding at 10:30 anymore. We must be there at 9:45. I mean, at 9:45. So I now learned to work backwards, that my hair will take this long, getting dressed, you know, and then we'll get there. So that was, for me, I guess, an aspiration. As I said, you start with the big picture. At least we agreed on values when we met. So I knew, you know, our values are agreed on, but operation details were not really what needed to be fine-tuned. So I was like, this guy is going to take me, you know, where I want to go. So let me toe the line a bit, of course, with a bit of
but also
push and pull here and there.
There also has to be clear communication of what is important for you. I mean, for me, and maybe it's how I was brought up, but also how I've learned to work. So time was a very important thing for me. But I guess sometimes where we go wrong and why we'll argue, have robust conversations at times was that I didn't communicate to her clearly why this thing is very important to me, because according to me, this was it's a personality thing. It's ethics. You know, that if I told someone I'm going to be here at 10, then I'll show up at 10. And I had to communicate it very clearly to her and help her understand, but also being gracious, because, I mean, you're coming together, two individuals who have had 20, 30 years of experience, and now you're trying to unlearn some of the things that you have learned in the past, you know, and trying to create something new. So it does take a longer time. It's not, you know, you say it today and it happens overnight. Right. So there has to be that grace that you pass on towards one another, right. Even as you clearly communicate to each other. This is important for me, and then sharing those values.
There's more of an expectation in marriage that you give room for me and compromise. But in dating, not so much. So how do you deal with that where, okay, you know, you like the person, getting to know each other, but you also need to kind of lay down these boundaries, healthy boundaries for each other. How do you do that to where it's not like you're beating down the law, you must, but respecting the other person as well?
I think the time thing I picked up even when we were dating. So he'd never be late for a date.
Wow.
Obviously.
That's very commendable, Pastor.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, and I learned later on when I had, we had the conversation and a few fights, that for him, time equals respect. So I respect you, so I respect your time. So if I said 10 o'clock, at 10 minutes to 10, I'll be there, because 10 o'clock we need to start. So, and for me that opened, I was like, oh, okay. It also speaks something else. It's another value. So respect, you know.
Yeah, and even the communication bit is that when you just lay down the law without helping someone understand the reason why I'm doing this.
As a boyfriend, I know.
As a boyfriend,
I know. It actually comes out like that you are laying down the law. If you come and tell me, you know, this is who I am. I do A, I do B, I do C. You know, I don't do A, I don't do B. So try and figure yourself out in this. Then really, you don't desire a relationship with me. You want something else completely different. The challenge that we're having is a lot of people are dating, but all we talk about is, oh, you have a nice dress. Oh, I like your eyes. Oh, I like your eyebrows. And that's it. But then you're gonna spend the rest of your life with this individual. And you have no idea how they spend their money. You have no idea how they relate to their family, how they spend their time. Because how they spend their time, maybe for them, they wake up in the morning and life just happens. You know, let's wake up and feel how the day goes by.
On them.
But then for you are brought up that you work to either get paid or you work to earn a living. So if you don't have these conversations, they are very important conversations for you to have. And we need to have them, but then there has to be like an ounce of grace and patience towards the other person, because you're not changing this person to become you. It's two of you coming together to create something more great.
Great point. On that note, we need to take a short break, but I love the fact that both of you actually said it. It makes it easier to kind of communicate the boundaries when you talk about the bigger picture.
Yes.
This is why we're doing this. So you can see yourself flowing in this journey together.
Exactly.
But that's a great point. Let's take a short break here in Victoria's Lounge. The conversation on boundaries continues. Stay with us. Okay, welcome back. We're still on this subject of boundaries in relationships and family. We haven't come to family just yet, but I know we will. My audience is just waiting to give comments and ask questions. Yes, please, go ahead.
Pastor Kelvin. I've had the privilege of working with the couples, preparing them for marriage as a pastor. But I've also had the not so nice privilege of working with them when they do have trouble and in marriage counseling. And one of the things that I've found is a problem when couples cross that line. You know, the dating, everyone is so good. The preparing for marriage, okay, we begin to see some things, you know, a bit shaky because the color schemes are not right and there's a bit of issues. Then they settle into the beginning of marriage. And then reality sets in.
Yes.
But one of the things that I've found a challenge, and I'm not always sure how to even counsel couples through this, is when very clear supposed boundaries were set before marriage. And then when they get married, it's like that boundary is out.
Off the window.
You know, so one part of the couple gets confused. You know, I went in knowing that you were like this, you had this stand. And let me give a good example. Let's just say it's a couple that met in the club. You know, and so they were out every Friday, they were out on Saturdays, you know, Sunday they tried to go to church, and then Monday to, you know, Friday they were working, and then it began again. And then they get married. And but there's a child not coming. But somewhere along the line, the wife says, I'm not into that scene anymore. I'm not clubbing, I'm not going out. You know, she says, now I'm a wife and I'm a mother, and so we don't do that kind of thing. But the husband is saying, but that's what brought us together. That's where we connected. And now you won't even go out with me for a drink or for dinner or to hang out and watch football, you know, especially those football issues. What, you know, how
Football
do we...
is amazing.
Yeah, once every 4 years.
Once every 4 years.
Once every 4 years. But how do you, you know, how do you help couples realize that you can negotiate a boundary, but you can't destroy boundaries that were very important to you going in? Like, she can't destroy your boundary for time. But how do you negotiate around boundaries?
On the ones who are dating, that's why it's very important for you to have the fundamental conversations and keep poking, keep prodding and asking the right questions. If you don't know what the right questions are, I mean, Google. I mean, questions to ask a boyfriend. I mean, there are resources left, right, and center. The church is there to help you. I mean, there are many churches that are doing premarital counseling, and they can help you in asking these questions. Now, you may not be able to figure out all the issues, everything, but it will sort of give you an indication of who this person is and what they're about. And hopefully that will help you make a decision, so that it's an informed decision. You know why you're getting into this relationship and how it's bound to sort of play out. On the ones who are married, I will say that, especially for the ones who remain in their old ways, there's a challenge, and without even, I guess, rebuking them harshly, but rebuking them with love, is that I've gone through transformation even as an individual since I got married. I haven't remained where I was. Something has changed because responsibilities continue to increase, not only because of marriage, but also because of my children, my workspace. I haven't remained at the same place, so I'm not playing the same league that I was playing before. And if I'm going to belittle the concerns that she has raised and play it out like, you know what, no, this is who we used to be, so we are not going to change that, then I think I'm being unfair to the other person. And there's a call to maturity that I need to mature enough to listen to her and hear. If she's very important for me to share my life with, then if she came and shared with me and said, hey, here's a concern that I do have. Now that we have children, we can't go out Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You know, maybe we can do Friday. And maybe that's where you can do a compromise, where you can say, hey, I know we've been doing all weekend, but what if we just did one night a week? And that will help us. Because I feel like it's about compromise, you know, where she brings this, and I'm like, okay, I'm not able to come the full 10 yards, but I can come up to this point. I can try and do this. So that might help, but there has to be a desire from every individual to make this thing work. Because if one person is willing and the other person is not, it will be difficult.
When you're dating, it's very easy for you to set boundaries because at the end of the day, you have your separate places to go home to, right? But in marriage, this person is always there, you know? So, of course, you know, setting the bigger boundaries of how you relate with the opposite sex and all those. But then there's a day-to-day boundary setting where you're in the house, you're always there. You know, how do you set those small boundaries where you're saying, this is not the right time to speak to my husband, this is not the right time to speak to my wife, I need to give her time. How did you guys manage to do that? If you have managed. If you have managed.
I think it's a work in progress.
Yes.
Yeah, every day comes with its own challenges. But, well, it's an interesting question because we have agreed, like now, like with the kids, we know that we had agreed that the kids will not consume we won't be consumed of Mama Nani, and you know, and that becomes, we lose who Lucy and Kelvin were, even as individuals. Before we became Mr. and Mrs. somebody, and we became Mama Nani, then you still need to keep those. Yes. At the beginning, especially of parenting and of being a mother, you kind of get lost in diapers and formula and, you know, all that. But then then your partner at that point can wake you up to say, hey, you need to go to the salon. Hey, your nails, you know, like, you know, you were this person. And because you had those robust conversations at the beginning of either your dating or your early years of marriage, then the boundary still holds true, because now you can't be mama nanny forever. You need to wake up and be, you know, that girl who I liked, or that guy who, you know,
And even those moments of fighting where sometimes you're like, okay, is this a good time for me to talk to my wife? It comes with time. You'll make mistakes, and it's okay to make mistakes. There are times when I've said something and I'm like, oh, I shouldn't have said
Foot in mouth.
You know,
Situation.
and it can happen even, you know, several times. And what you do is that learn from your mistakes. You know, don't keep coming back to it, but learn from your mistakes. But then also that thing of over communication, where I'll tell her, for me, you know, this is not a good time for us to have this conversation, because it requires 100%, you know, concentration, and I can't give you that. So that thing of over communication, and by the way, it sounds nice and perfect and rosy, but it has come over time. There are times when we still make the mistakes where I'll go and talk to her and I'm like, how comes you're not responding to me? I need you to respond to me. But allow each other to make those mistakes.
I just want to share a thought, especially around people who are dating, people who are dating in preparation for marriage. I think one of the things that, and this is in the context of the church, there's very specific guidelines the church puts in place. But then there's people who maybe live outside of the church, who live by different guidelines. But in the context of the church, for example, even people who go to church, people would say, oh, we both go to church, so we are both good for dating, but I don't think that's the case, because you can be unequally yoked even with a Christian. So setting those boundaries, you can set boundaries in the beginning, and you can share your values, and this is who I am, go for the counseling, do the personality, say, okay, I'm an introvert, don't talk to me until this time. When I come in the evening, wait 2 hours, and then we can have a conversation. Those are things that you can say, but in reality, as human beings, we evolve. And in the context of having a relationship with a significant other, there is other people involved. There is family involved. There is children involved. There is friends involved who have an input in who you become.
Talk a bit about that, and I'll pick off something he said about how you grow through life, and sometimes you're going to her and asking her, why are you not even responding to me? I'm hearing something to you and all that. And cite my own example of earlier on in my marriage, I'm married to one wife and we have 3 kids. But earlier on in my marriage, I was the guy who used to keep quiet. She would come up with an issue, and I would go into a space where I just go quiet, and it's very frustrating. And later on, I come to understand that. And yes, she was really frustrated. She got really frustrated. And it took for us to go through a crisis of sorts in our marriage that almost threatened our marriage, for us to come to the place where we go at it. And healthily so. We go at it. Because, like she said, we are in one team. We are fighting to make our team even better, and for our marriage to be better. And she's not coming at me to destroy me. No, it's because we need to get to a better place. And for that, I think we need to be able to grow in marriage and have and almost kind of destroy boundaries to some extent.
In a good way.
To some extent, because now all of a sudden you need to go into truth. And truth knows no bounds sometimes. And if you're going to be sincere to each other, I'll be up in your business. and as I do that, we continue to have an even more enriched marriage and relationship, because that's the only way. And if you keep safeguarding yourself too much, you may not go on to a place of a healthy marriage. So you need to sometimes let go of the boundaries a little bit and let the other person in, so that you can grow to be a better unit.
That is a great point. When boundaries are necessary and not in relationships. That is great.
You have to be flexible.
You have to be. We're human beings and we change. So want to get your closing
Yeah.
remarks, Pastor
Yes,
Kevin and
yes.
Lucy, before we wrap up the session.
Yeah, boundaries are important because they help you define the critical pieces. But then when you become too rigid with your boundaries, then your life becomes very mechanical, almost to the point of stifling, because I do this at this hour, at this minute, and I don't do this. But I mean, we are human beings who are meant to relate with one another, and we are all different. So whereas these things are important, how do we ensure that we don't have them to our detriment, but we have them to our
benefit,
success and prosperity?
Boundaries are important, and they probably help us to save ourselves from ourselves. Because left to our own, we can do too much of one thing. And I say that especially for women, because I feel like we get carried away a lot easier, maybe, than men. So to embrace the boundaries, to be flexible where we need to be flexible, to be structured where we need to be structured, but also in a marriage setting to allow each other that space to speak and say, I think you're becoming too lax on this, you need to hold it up a little tighter, or, you need to learn this one, and all for the greater benefit of you as an individual and the marriage.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Pastor Kevin and Lucy, and your great insights. Wow, I just feel like I've gone through my own kind of reckoning to you. This is great, and I hope the viewers have felt the same way as well. Let's take a short break here on Victoria's Lounge. Boundaries in Friendships up next. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching Victoria's Lounge, still on boundaries. Joining me now is Pastor Angie. She told me to call her Angie. I find it so difficult to do that. I'm a pastor's kid, so I just cannot not use the title. But thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you so much for having me.
This issue of boundaries in friendships oftentimes can be a bit difficult because we feel that we can give a lot more grace to friends, people that we know who are close to us, but there's still need for them. So let's look at the kinds of boundaries we can set for male and female kinds of relationships outside of dating. This is just strictly platonic. Yeah.
Wow, that's a bit of a hard, I guess, but I'm here, I'm going to say about friendship. I think, first of all, for me, what I found is that I've learned how to set the boundaries as I've grown in relationship and grown with friends, because relationships are very important and they're key to life, but sometimes we don't understand that as we are starting off. But then also you learn to define, and put where your boundaries as you grow, or as sometimes they say, twice bitten. What's it, once shy, twice bitten, or something like that.
Yeah.
Like once you go through a certain kind of experience, then it makes you, in the next relationship, or even in that, if you define the relationship, then you set the boundary now depending on the experiences that you've had. So I find that I've grown also as a person in how I've set those boundaries. Yeah, so
and what from your experiences have you noticed were boundaries that are necessary even to this day from various experiences you've had in friendships?
Number one, I think, is not sharing too much, because I'm a very free person, so I really would overshare and share and share. So as I've gotten through life, you guilty?
Yes,
Good.
yes.
I am. So I'm a real open book, and I think the surprise was also not realizing not everybody's an open book like that, and then realizing, oh, maybe I've overshared. So even these days I have this thing in my thing that goes ting ting. Have you overshared in that area? What do you need to share and what don't you need to share? And I think another important one which comes to mind is also learning not to say everything. You see, I think when we're younger, we say things. We just say things. We just say them. But I've learned, do I need to say that? Is it necessary? How is it going to help? Before, I really didn't care whether it helped or didn't help. I didn't even think about it, whether it was going to help or not.
What does one do when the boundary has been violated or crossed, because that is bound to happen? What do you do in a situation like that where it could break the friendship, but you need to also take steps to reconcile? So explain your position, but also reconcile the friendship.
I think immediately when you were talking, the one thing that came to mind is, was that defined? Was it a boundary that was defined before? Because the problem with us, we have a lot of I think gray areas where we haven't, blurred lines, where we haven't actually really defined what the boundary is, and therefore, as you push, as you engage and relate, that's when you maybe understand how to define the boundaries. And then sometimes we don't say what we really want, or we don't say what we really want in terms of the friendship, in terms of the boundary, in terms of how you want everything conducted, and then that will always produce a problem. But I don't think, especially being older, I think older and wiser, slightly wiser at least, it's important to fix it. It's important to, I remember there's a lady I always quote, her name is I think Sophia Nielsen, and she says, don't cut what you can untie. So it's always better to leave things neat in a way that you can revisit the relationship rather than completely just close the door and say that I'm done with that relationship.
Right, I'd like to open up to the audience in terms of your experiences when it comes to friendships. Dealing with crossed boundaries as well, how did you manage that?
Is the African psychological construct is deeply embedded with Ubuntu, yeah? So most time, the concept of Ubuntu, socialism, community, we are one and so on. And I found it, I think, beneficial to apply the psychological law of the first, that the first time the boundary was crossed, how did I handle it? For instance, one day, some years back, okay, maybe a friend. I just happened. Yeah. So we were just seated watching football and just living life and just being normal people. And we have a knock in the door at 1 a.m. And when you open, we find an ex of one of us who has had an issue, maybe thrown out of the house and so on. And they decided just to come and sleep over. And I was shocked beyond words because it's difficult even to begin to express some of the emotions and some of the psychological torture that we were going through, because it's very hard to even begin to imagine, why would you come here? All right. Yeah. And then I began to, not my space, a friend's space. A friend's space. So when I interrogated,
there are two people in this house. We're hoping.
So when I interrogated the friend, it came to it. I realized that in as much as this was the ex, there was still cordial friendship. There was still exchange of M-Pesa once in a while, and so on. So therefore, then I saw that if you gave gangrene cancer a door, they'll take over the house.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened. So I think it's beneficial just to be bold enough to apply the law of the first, that when somebody crosses the boundary, that day, you need to tell them.
People always ask this question, can I be friends with my ex? Which is, what kind of boundary can you
Great area. But you see, now for me, that's an actual truth. I'm actually friends with my ex now. And he was even actually an ex-husband, but we are actually friends now. I don't know how long has it taken, I don't know, to get to the friendship. I have to think about the time factor. And again, what she was saying, it's now my choice. By the time I was angry, so I guess there are also emotions to play. That's why I'm saying, even when this ex knocks at the door, first we were assuming there are two people in the house, there are emotions in play. So how do you let the emotions play out? So for me, first I was angry, and then after being angry, I blamed him for everything. Then after that I said, okay, even we had a part to play. So there was like process was going on and I was healing. Then it got to the place where we are friends, where we have a child to raise together in different homes, but we're actually friends now. But I think maybe it's taken maybe 10 years, if I can guess, to get to that point. So we've dealt with the emotions along the way, and then of course there were clear boundaries. Yeah.
I went to a financial seminar where we were being taught how to budget. And the one line item I'd never seen on any other seminar and I've been to many. I'm trying to sort out my finances all the time. But he had this line budget that said benevolence. Oh. Yeah. And he said, you need to fix the amount of money that you have in your budget to give away.
Oh, wow.
And it wasn't the same as, the church says you have to have your tithe and your offering. It wasn't that. It was another one. And what he said was that, if someone came up to you, and depending again on that level of friendship or whatever, then and they asked you for 5,000 shillings, and you've budgeted 10,000 for that month to give away, then you bless them and say, here, 5,000, don't need to pay me back. We're done with it. But then there'll be situations, obviously, when someone comes to you asking for more money than what you've actually set aside in your budget to give. Then you can have one of two answers, depending again on the person, is to say, this month I don't have anything more to give. So maybe next month we can have this conversation if the need is still present. Or you can say, because you're my friend, then I will go the extra mile and figure out something for you. But then make it very clear. Have that very clear boundary. Is this something I expect back from you? And you can even help them and say, look, I know your situation. I don't expect it back next month, lump sum. Let's work out a deal. Let's break it down. Let's give you a bit of, leeway that you can pay me back on these days. And then don't do the thing of like, if you don't pay me by this day, I'm going to put 10% interest, on it. You have to. It just that just wrecks friendship.
Yeah.
But you've got to be very clear about what you have, because you can't violate your own boundaries because of a friend or a family member. But you can plan and say, I want to help people, so let me put something in my budget. And if it's not used that month, no one asks you, praise God, then you roll it over to the next month. And then someone may come where you've got 3 months worth of money, and you can actually help substantially. Now, do I do that personally?
No.
Oh, good. But that's brilliant,
So you
though.
anticipate.
Yes, I'm telling you.
I think that works very well for a very structured person.
Yes.
Yeah.
But if you're not structured, and you believe in windfalls and stuff like that and everything, it's just important to define to your friends, this is the far we can go.
Yeah.
For me, what works better is don't be readable. Let them not know that I can come to you anytime and get what I want.
I was going to say that.
So sometimes I will give you, other times I wouldn't, because it's very easy to create a culture in people where they now know that
If I
Jackie,
need.
for example, always has a benevolence kitty. We can keep going to her.
Now you're in trouble. You said it now. Now we know she has a benevolent kitty.
So depending on how well I can speak for myself, she'll give me something. So for me, it's just don't be readable.
And Angie, some take-homes you can give us in terms of boundaries and friendship.
About boundaries. Number one, I think be the friend that you want to be.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes we have this way that what we want is not what we give. So be the friend that you want to be, I think. I think don't be so hard on yourself. Be flexible and then develop, because sometimes you don't want to get stuck in, oh my goodness, there may be an experience that happened which was maybe negative or positive, and then you never move on from there. People, and I think also another thing is that people evolve and people change, and sometimes we have this fixed mindset about somebody or something that happened, and then you're fixed about it. Just be flexible and cut people some slack, and then just like I said, I think for me my greatest takeout from even as I was preparing is my reaction. How am I going to react? What is necessary to say? How long has this friendship been? I mean, evaluate, look at the whole context of the friendship.
Awesome advice. Yeah, thank you so much, Angie.
Thank you so
to my
much.
audience for the wonderful insights.
Yeah,
this has been
this audience.
great. Wow. Audience who will be coming to become guests. I'm telling you, this is
I
wonderful.
know.
Thank you so much to Radisson Blue Hotel also for hosting us. Keep the conversations going on social media, #Victoria's Lounge, and let's do this again next week. Have a good night.
I just happened. Yeah.